I'll sit right next to you.
Cool.
Oh.
It's always a rule, don't fall off the back of the stage. Watch where your chair is. It's a rule of panels, don't fall off the stage.
There was no innovative way of doing it?
Okay, well, wait a minute for people to say.
We would think about it, but...
Okay, hello everyone. We're going to get started. We have a fun panel for this afternoon because we all like panels that are fun. And so we're highly motivated to make this interactive and interesting. The topic is business models for Africa. We can ask ourselves if there actually are different business models for Africa. But there's a lot of context that we need to consider, and so we'll be talking about the context first. And we'll do some brief introductions. So I'll go first. My name's Deborah Magid. I'm with IBM. I'm in a small corporate venture group that does not have a financial role. I have a strategy and relationship job. I get to travel to wonderful places like this and meet with investors and meet with entrepreneurs and see what interesting and good and unexpected things might come out of that. Dante?
Thank you, Deborah. So my name is Dante Disparte. I am the founder and CEO of a company called Risk Cooperative. So we do all of the three things under one roof that any entrepreneur has to deal with. We deal with the strategy, we deal with risk, and we deal with the funding, capital management. I've had an extensive career, including at one point or another, I used to manage Land Rover dealerships in 32 countries in sub-Saharan Africa. So when we start getting into the conversation about business models, I want to leverage some of that experience because ultimately, a business model is not something you do in a lab, right? Unless, of course, it's a vaccine, then you don't want to put that out there.
There's some things you do in a lab.
Start killing people. But what I would encourage of people in the room and of entrepreneurs worldwide is stop making your idea the best kept secret on the planet. Start thinking of exposure. So the first place to get money for your business is the market. And if nobody knows about what you're doing, nobody could fund it, no customers will buy it. And so a lot of business model innovation, in my opinion, has to be very much like the scientific method. You have to have a very strong hypothesis. You have to test that. And when you find an error, the faster you find that error, the faster it is that you could improve upon it. And so testing the hypothesis and going through that process of trial and error is sort of the key way, in my view, to get exposure and to improve.
Right, and especially in a fast-moving market, which is true with most of the world right now.
Exactly.
Thanks.
Exactly.
George? It's on.
It's on. Right. My name is George Mulamula. I'm the founder and CEO of the only tech incubator in Tanzania. And my background basically is very wide to the extent that I worked for WIPO in Geneva. I was the first Rwandan RRDB Principal Deputy CEO. And now I'm back in Tanzania helping entrepreneurs grow, and I created this tech hub. And I'll tell you the model later on and how we proceed. Thank you.
Okay.
David.
Yes, my name is David Kuria, Kenyan, founder and CEO of Ecotact and Africaco. I'm a leading social entrepreneur in the space of here. And I think the challenge and the opportunities that offer is that every time I listen to the news or hear the challenges affecting this continent, the number of people without water, the number of people without safe sanitation, we are talking about billions of people globally and millions in the space of Africa. And so my last venture, I did a model on sanitation in the urban poor, trying to accelerate the coverage of dignity and access to toilets. We are now dealing with water and making sure that the last mile get access to safe drinking water. And we'll discuss that.
Very cool. And I hope you're all glad to see two women on the panel. So, thank you, Taya.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. My name is Tayo Akinyemi. I'm the Executive Director of AfriLabs, which is a Pan-African network of tech innovation hubs. I'm sure if, those of you who are from Nairobi are familiar with what a tech hub is, but for those of you who are not, a tech hub is essentially a physical space that serves as a nexus point for anyone interested in tech, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So most of our members, and we have 38 members in 18 countries, are somehow connected to supporting startups and entrepreneurs and those who might become entrepreneurs in some way.
Harry.
Thank you, Deborah. Good afternoon. My name is Harry. I wear a few hats, but I'm an entrepreneur to begin with. And I've been plugged into the IT sector for probably, before it was called IT, now it's called ICT, but I was there before it was ICT, when it was IT. Yeah, so probably 17 plus years in the sector, built a few businesses, also participated in policy issues, strategy issues around in the continent, in Africa, but recently started doing something we're calling Demo Africa. Anybody who doesn't know about Demo Africa? Okay, you can see me after this.
Demo's a big brand in the US, so soon it should be a big brand here too.
Yeah,
the biggest tech events in the continent.
Yeah, so what we do is we are a connector, really. We connect mature startups, not mature in the sense that they're old, but mature in the sense they have a product that can go to market. We connect those with customers. We also connect those with investors and also the media. Recently, maybe I just throw this in, we started working here in Kenya on something called Enterprise Kenya. So if you don't know about Enterprise Kenya, you can ask Mike Masharia, who is there. He'll give you a brief of that.
So the title of this session is Business Models for Africa, but I don't have to tell you, somebody from Silicon Valley doesn't have to tell you that there isn't one Africa. And so if you're trying to do business and create a business model that you think will work and that will scale, you have to consider lots of different things from country to country, different currencies, different types of governance, different levels of trust and openness, lots of differences. So George, do you want to say a couple of words about how you view that?
Right. The incubator that we created, the model that we created, can be understood if I tell you this story. A friend of mine came back from the US and he had some money, went to work, didn't like the work, so he decided to go into business, be an entrepreneur. In the area where he was, he looked around and found out that there was a lack of tomatoes. So then he decides to buy a small pickup truck, and then he drives south of the country to the south, buys tomatoes, and brings them back to the area and sells them. After 6 months, he bought a second pickup. By the end of the year, he had 3 of them. Now, his neighbor, there's a fence between the 2 houses, so this gentleman buying these cars. He says, wow, this guy is selling tomatoes, and he's making money, about 3 cars. He was a civil servant, decides to quit, gets his pension, buys a pickup truck, and he goes south again to buy tomatoes. Comes back. 6 months later, he's getting bankrupt. This guy, in the meantime, has bought his 4th one. So he asks him, what do you do? What did you do for you to make this while I'm not making it? So this gentleman, my friend, felt sorry for him. He says, you know what? When the next one comes in, I'll call you over. And sure enough, a week later, this one of his pickup trucks comes in. It's got a tarpaulin on the top. So he calls him over and says, this is the pickup truck. See what I do. They open the tarpaulin. On top were tomatoes. In the middle were sacks of potatoes. At the bottom were sacks of rice. So now, the gist of the story is this. I live in a society, or in an environment, copycat syndrome, I call it.
Yes.
Never takes you anywhere if you don't do an analysis, basically. And then the issue of being an innovative entrepreneur, because as you move along and you've made sure that your main business is doing well, you diversify. You don't diversify at the start. You know, I get entrepreneurs who come in and says, I'm working on this project and I've got this idea I want to do, and he wants to do 10 ideas at the same time. It won't work, basically. So the issue, our model, the way it was created, because of the ecosystem, in the sense that we live in a country whereby if you want to tender, you must have 6 years of experience, you must have a bank account that's rolling out money or it's got funds in it for the past 3-4 years. But I'm a startup. I've got the best brilliant idea in the area, but nobody will support me. I go to a bank, the bank says, you need collateral for the financing I'm going to give you. I've got lots of stories on that for the entrepreneurs, basically. So now the way our model was set up as a PPP, between government, private sector, and NGOs, basically. And so that each one has to see the role they play in supporting startups, basically. So in other words, what this has helped us is that now we have that role. Everyone has a role to play in this, in helping entrepreneurs grow. So now, if there's a tender, and if it's the government tender, I can easily go to the government and say, there's a rule or a loophole, I wouldn't call it a loophole, it's a law, a regulation, that says that you can single source to another government entity. Okay, on my board, I've got people who, who are from government, from President's office to other government ministries. So now, let's find a way of working, of supporting this, as long as the technology used or the requirements can be met to the specifications required, basically.
Right.
And then we can support them, basically. So our model is a PPP model, which looks to see how can we break this ecosystem, which is not favorable for startups.
It's a problem for startups as they scale to go from one country to the next and to decide where to go next. It's a problem for multinationals who enter the continent as well. It's not just startups that have this problem. So when you're talking to clients who are trying to expand, and go from one country to the next, they have to make some decisions about where and how to do that. What kind of advice do you give people?
Well, so, my core business is in financial services, and particularly around risk and insurance.
Yes.
And what I tell a lot of people, I would rather insure a fleet of vehicles across Africa than anything in the United States. The reason being is risk in the United States is calculated by the imagination of 12 angry jurors.
That's true.
And so a liability is an uncalculated sum of money. Whereas the value of a bunch of vehicles being destroyed in a riot, I could quantify that and I could price that very accurately. So to me, investors that are on the sidelines, whether you're an entrepreneur or an established firm like IBM, if you're on the sidelines on sub-Saharan Africa, I think you're missing out, as I've said in many, many sessions, you're missing out on the next 100 years of growth on the planet. But the way to do it ultimately is mastery of the downside. Understanding concretely what can go wrong, understanding concretely what are you going to do when things go wrong, because they will everywhere. But then go and invest and expand into new markets. And the other key thing too, and this is sort of what I find is a great opportunity for entrepreneurs in sub-Saharan Africa, there's a big untapped opportunity by working closely in the supply chains of multinationals.
Yeah.
I know IBM, Google, there's a number of big firms, the big global brands that come into sub-Saharan Africa, and they themselves thrive on having ecosystems around them. And I think that instead of just going to go talk to investors about your pitch, prepare a pitch that's so perfect, you could use it for your sales strategy, you could use it to present to IBM, you could use it for angels, incubators, and the whole 9 yards. Create one story for your company, or your narrative, or your business model, and tell that story to everyone who can hear you. Because the best kept secrets don't get funded, the best kept secrets don't get sold. And staying on the sidelines, I think, and I really do this everywhere I go, staying on the sidelines on Africa, in my opinion, is a very, very dangerous proposition for global companies.
Yeah, I agree. Well, IBM has one of the biggest presences in tech across the whole continent, so we're very excited about it, and I totally agree with you. But Ty, when you coach entrepreneurs on how to scale and how to be successful, and they try to go from one country to the next and form partnerships with other people, and enter these supply chains, it's got to be difficult for them if there are cultural differences or different appetites for risk or different attitudes about how to do business. How do you coach startups on dealing with that?
So those conversations are largely decentralized at the hub level. So a hub that's supporting its cohort of startups, if it's formally accelerating or incubating, will have that conversation. But what we are looking at the network level is basically how to leverage networks. So if we have a hub in Cape Town and we have a hub in sorry, I'm trying to think of the city. If we have a hub in South Africa and we have a hub in Cameroon and they want to do an exchange, we're thinking about what frameworks can we put in place to create a soft landing experience for those entrepreneurs. So if you're on the ground looking for business development opportunities for partnerships to understand the lay of the land, what can the value exchange be? What part of that is complementary or part of the network? What part of that is a value-added service? So, I mean, I think one of the most important things when you enter a new market is to work with locals who understand the market, who share similar ideas in terms of what your business is to pursue that value proposition, and the network can sort of help build those bridges. Okay,
so you're relying on people and the way they collaborate with each other and the knowledge they have. So Harry, you know, you work across Africa too. Do you look at it the same way, or do you take a different approach?
Yes and no. Because we leverage on partnerships a lot. But what probably for us is actually working on the different companies that come to demo. So maybe just for the benefit of the guys who don't know what demo is. So demo, we go across Africa looking for innovative companies. These are companies that have developed interesting solutions to existing problems or future problems if they're that visionary. And they bring these startups into one place where they can launch their businesses in front of people like you, investors, corporate buyers, corporate technology buyers, the media. Because what we've noticed is a lot of startups, they're mainly looking for probably 3 or 4 things. They're looking for investment in their companies. They're looking for somebody to buy their product. They're looking for publicity. And they're also looking for partnerships. So those we've identified those are the key areas that, say, startups look for. So we try to bring this congregation of people who can fit into that bill. And we get these startups to actually launch in front of these people. So when you talk to the different startups, you find that each of those startups has, you know, they have a specific goal to achieve in demo. So they come in with a specific area that they want fitted. And so in terms of their approach, in terms of if they want to, probably they want to look for business. They got business in Nigeria, now they want to get business in Kenya. So they do their own one-to-one engagement with the different people who are coming from Kenya. So there's, you know, we create that atmosphere where the startups themselves do business. We coach them, we help them, we present them, but they take their own initiative in terms of reaching out to the different people who are there, reaching out to the different startups who are in the same event, so that, because we've seen a lot of JVs between startups. So that's how we look at it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I want to sort of stick on the same topic, but talk about financing and different ways of getting financing in different places. And one of the ways of getting financing lately in the US and in the UK and some other places around the world has been what we call social impact investing or social entrepreneurship. And David won an African Social Entrepreneur of the Year award. And for those of you who don't know what this is, there were some comments made this morning about doing well by doing good. So there are some classic venture firms like the Acumen Fund or Invested Development or Kapoor who work exactly the same way as any other venture capital firm, but they will only invest in projects that are for the social good. Sometimes it's agriculture, it could be education, it could be how to bring lighting or cooking stoves to villages, it's lots of different things, and it's even taught at universities. So David, if you could tell us what it was like for you to start this business and get the funding, and what it's like to explain that to people.
Okay, thanks. Me think in terms of the continent, there are several problems and challenges. And I think the future of this continent lies on how we manage to turn our challenges to opportunities. From Ebola to the safe issues of safe water, how do we turn those to opportunities and optimize in terms of innovation? When I travel across this continent, I see several innovations, very small scale. You go to any village in Kenya, in Uganda, Tanzania, but the challenges are the ecosystem. How do we scale some of these brilliant ideas to make systemic change, that can transform lives apart from the village level to the high level? Now, that's the biggest challenge. When I was starting and trying to think from an architect to building toilets and handling little stuff within our cities and our urban centers, and the first thing is that complex ecosystem. How do you get the registration? This is predominantly across the continent, mainly a government affairs to provide sanitation, to provide water to its citizen. And here you come, you want to provide because you see a gap. And these are the gaps that we need to see. How do we influence more so that the legislations are able to support the innovations that are coming from the ground? Financing. I think 10 years ago when I was starting, it was a complex agenda. Today, at least, there are several people you can call, you can meet and discuss financing. I went to about 10 banks in Kenya, from the top banks. What do you want to do? Toilets. Really, is that a business, really? You don't have something better to do? Those are some of the challenges. You go from one bank to the other, and I can imagine the ground social entrepreneurs who can see an opportunity, whether it's waste management, solar, and they are like, we need to get position to be able to scale up. But how do you move to the next lander? The other issue in terms of the ecosystem, because I think that's where everything gets bogged up. You go to the US, there is the silicon. What we need to do is to get a silicon for this continent where great ideas can be incubated. How do we get the knowledge to scale? Most of our people, you get a brilliant idea, and the next thing you don't even want to share. Supposing my neighbor picks it and start working on it. How do we respect proprietary rights? The copyright. It's not respected in most of these countries. So you sit there, you think you're doing an idea, and the next few months you see it rolling out there. And so it's purely how we manage to build that ecosystem. And that's the hand of most social entrepreneurs. There are so many problems that offers opportunity for our young people. How do we focus on our teenagers in this continent? Two emerging issues. In the next less than 10 years, more than 50% of this continent will be young people.
Right.
The next thing, according to the UN Habitat, is that more than 50% in the next 5 years will be living in urban areas. That poses its own internal and external complex issues. How do we handle the urban management? Go to any country, any city in this continent, the first thing you'll see are garbage. And that's a big problem. Get outside Africa, and garbage is a big resource. How do you turn it, convert it to electricity, convert it to other products? Here, it's still a challenge. Now, we increase the number of population to our cities. We are getting even more complex in terms of problems. And the challenges are, if we handle this ecosystem, then we open opportunities for investors to come and say, this looks a small idea, but can grow. To me, the future of this continent lies in how we handle our social issues, create some resources, and create some revenue without compromising that, the last mile. Right. How do we take care of that last mile? How do we use technology, Safaricom? I fully agree, we are very generous, the giving. But more importantly, the M-Pesa growth is because of how do we reach 500 kilometers where I come from to transfer 100 shillings. which takes me a whole day. With the technology coming in, I'll easily adopt it. Not because I want to give, but it's a necessity. It saves me money.
Right. Anybody here who how many people here live in Nairobi? So you know how difficult it is to be in urban environments. Here's a statistic for you. 2007 was the year in which half the world's population lived in cities, and it's just going up from that. And so what you're doing is solving social problems. You're solving problems that governments, civil, municipalities, state governments should care about. And your incubator, George, is with the Commission of Science and Technology, and you do some work with the government. I mean, are they being helpful? How does it, I bet there are cases where they're being helpful and where you'd like them to get out of the way. And so we're all friends here. Can you talk about that?
It's the biggest challenge that I face.
Here we are at a government-sponsored conference.
Right, yes.
Please
I have
do.
to be careful. It's a mindset issue, basically. There is a way of doing the classical bureaucratic way, and then the mindset to grasp and embrace the innovation that comes in, and together with that comes the issue of to what extent do I see that as a threat to my classical way of working, basically. And this is what there is. But if you got top leadership, they understand. They say, yes, we need to move our country forward to the extent that, they say that science, technology, innovation should play a role in every government department that there is, basically. We go to open data right now to say that for the simple reason that we want now to get entrepreneurship to come in and pick up on the data and solve the problems, the challenges that are out there in the country, and whereabouts I think 80 or 75% are in the rural areas, basically. But then it's a mindset to grasp that and say, how do we change it? The middle tier is where we have a challenge to see, can they grasp it, and the notion of the insecurity of doing what they're doing, basically. So it's, as my colleague here was saying, trust becomes an issue. Can you trust? And then the mindset that goes to say, can we change that, from the top level perspective, to see what changes can we make? So then you have to put in strategies and place yourself in a way so that you can battle this, solve this for the sake of your entrepreneurs so that they can scale up and get things done.
Yes, that's right. And the role of governments has to do with setting the right context in which investment and entrepreneurship can happen, but they also do invest, and the Kenyan government does some various kinds of investment. And so I was wondering from Harry and Ty, do you help your startups get investment? And these days, there are lots of alternative ways to get capital, lots of different ways for startups to get money. Can you talk about what you advise your companies to do?
Yeah, maybe I can just go back a bit in terms of government. I think governments, and I'm talking about African governments because those are the ones I work with a lot. I think there's an awakening that innovation and entrepreneurship is a way to go. But I think there's also an issue of necessity where governments are feeling the pressure of having a huge youth demographic that they have to deal with.
Right.
So the only way to get out of that is to build entrepreneurship into the youth so that they can create jobs and create wealth. So it's almost a necessity for governments now to start looking at entrepreneurship as a way out of a really pressing problem.
It's a form of economic development.
Exactly. So yeah, so that's I just wanted to say that. But in terms of investments, there's a lot of sources, crowdfunding, but I think a lot of what we're seeing now, because a lot of the startups I work with are probably looking at monies between 100,000 and probably 1.5 million to 2 million. Now that's everybody who is in the investment space. They know how difficult it is to get that kind of money because it's early stage, high risk, and a lot of people don't want to get into that space. But when we started, we actually thought venture capital was the way to go, and we really tried to knock in different venture capital firms to try and get people, excited about what we're doing and exciting them to look at the companies that we're launching. But after 3 years and learning the dynamics of investment, then we realized that probably venture capital is not what we should be looking at. Probably we should be looking at a lower level where we're talking about angels and maybe super angels. So that has been our focus, moving from really the true sense of the word VC to a lower level where we're talking about angels and super angels. And for that, we've, in partnership with different organizations of the Lions Initiative, we've come up with something we're calling the African Business Angels Network, which is a network of angel networks across Africa. I think now we have probably in Urban, there are about, I think, 12 angel networks from different countries, and that is being grown. We are growing it organically, but preaching to the different people who are looking at the same things.
That's really great because it's almost impossible for startups to figure that out. It's a very mysterious set of people and processes, and that's, as soon as you make it transparent, it's really helpful.
Yeah.
So Tayo, when you advise your entrepreneurs, do you coach them on how to get funding, and do you introduce them to various kinds of investors? How do you deal with that with the people you're interacting with?
So I'd say generally yes, but there are a couple of pre-funding or pre-finance questions that also need to be asked that are arguably as important about the ones that are related to the funding. So understanding the true market opportunity and making an attempt through research and data collection to qualify the size of the business opportunity. So what actually is the size of the market? Are you clear about what that is? And is your analysis extending beyond the idea itself? And then once there's some level of clarity there, in terms of strategy, where are you focused? Are you local? Are you regional? Are you global? Is there a trajectory? Because how you intend to grow and scale your startup will affect the type of financing and support that you seek. I think sometimes there's a tendency, and not that this isn't true, it's absolutely true, there's a tendency to focus on the lack of finance, so the missing middle. But there maybe could be more discussion about the degree to which your specific business is appropriate for the type of capital that you're seeking.
Right,
if you are approaching a VC, VCs want to see a certain type of return. Are you clear about whether your business is competitive in that way? Because if it's not, you may need to think about either changing your strategy or seeking different types of capital.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because I coach a lot of startups myself in the US, but also in other places, and they often have no idea of what type of money they want. They just know they need to pay their staff or increase their engineering or get their product out the door, and they don't really think about what it means to take money from here, here, or here. And what's happening now is when you have crowdfunding, Dante, and you have corporate venture, and you have peer-to-peer lending, and all these things that are disrupting the capital markets, do you think that makes the whole system riskier or less risky, or we don't know yet?
Well, it's sort of, the way I see it is the tragedy of the commons, as you would say, that we have across Africa, the lack of infrastructure, the lack of electricity, the lack of reliability, and all the things that we would take for granted in advanced markets is an opportunity. Before the westward expansion in the United States, there were entrepreneurs who wanted to build rail networks. The gold rush, there were entrepreneurs who said, I don't want to be the guy digging for the gold, I want to be the guy supplying the shovels, because that's a perennial business. And so I think there's an opportunity across Africa to create the utilities that Africa will need in the next decade. In finance, in industry and infrastructure across the board. And yes, we of course need a legislative and a regulatory environment to keep pace with it. But honestly, in the 21st century, what good is copyright protection? Copyright protection is speed to market. Because the second, every single time I have a really good idea and I go, this is the one. And I start doing some research on it, I'm like, it's late, I'm late. And so for me, speed to market matters more. And the sooner you learn that you're about to fail or you're not quite onto something is the sooner you could shift just a bit and adapt your position in the marketplace. On funding, I don't see that there's more risk. On the contrary, I think we're in an era where anybody, anywhere can democratize access to capital. With a smartphone, I mean, M-Pesa is a great example. What percentage of Kenya's GDP is transferred through this platform? It's now become a utility. The financial regulator may have a view on what is the role that we have to play in regulating this type of money transfer situation. And so you've completely, as we said in the description of this panel, leapfrogged brick and mortar banking, you've leapfrogged fixed line telephony. And so how many more spaces are yet to be jumped over? And all of those sort of conventional approaches that, I wouldn't necessarily recommend importing Silicon Valley style entrepreneurship or funding into Africa. I think you needed a completely different model. Investors want things that many companies and many startups in Africa cannot provide. What's your exit strategy? Well, how many markets are terribly liquid across the continent? And so if someone asks you for an exit, you say, I'm building a business I want to run, not a business I want to fund. So dear entrepreneur out there, negotiate hard with the people who have the capital. Tell them I'm here to stay. I'm going to be the shea butter production mogul right there in the audience. You have a great example of what you could do when you stick with something. So don't run a business for 3 or 5 years, which is the investment horizon most investors want. Run a business for life and create a business off of which you can, go into adjacent markets. So from shea butter to this butter to that butter and create conglomerates. And that's how a lot of huge firms have created a lot of value. IBM has a venturing unit, right?
I should know. One of the places that entrepreneurs figure out a lot of this stuff is in the incubators and through the organizations that you have. And so I have a very global job. I travel all over the world. I do what we're doing today in other places, and there are thousands of incubators around the world. So I would maintain that there are so many that startups can't figure out what to do about that, where to go, which ones are high quality. Who would like to comment on how the world should work or does work in that respect? If you don't raise your hand, I'll call on you. Okay, George.
I don't think there is one solution fits all in terms of incubation. Tayo will attest to it. I think they did a study and say that half the incubators in Africa that start up, they fail, basically. Or I don't know, it's half or close to that amount. So, but then the success of an incubator depends on the ecosystem. It depends on the passion and the reason why it was created to an extent. And then, but then there is a variable that also comes in that plays a role in terms of the success or the sustainability of that incubator, basically. And that goes to both sides. I call end user and front end and back end. Back end meaning those who support the end users being the incubatees themselves, basically. So there is a mindset. I keep on talking about the mindset, basically what comes up, and let me tell you a story that leads to the mindset I'm talking about. I know somebody who came back and then he created a dry cleaning store and put up his sign that says Joe's Dry Cleaners. He was the only one in the area as an entrepreneur, and then he got all the business. And of course, we have got the copycat syndrome. Somebody else goes on the left of his and opened up ABC Dry Cleaners. His business started dwindling. And sure enough, somebody else opened up another one to his right, and he says, now what do I do now? And then he got this brilliant light came in his head, so he took off his sign that says Joe's Dry Cleaners and put the word entrance. So you can imagine why that happened. Those who are late, if you didn't get it, I'll explain it to you later. The point here is that it's creativity in the mind, basically. This is what we're talking about. And we tend to be slow. Now, we tend to be slow in creativity. Now, the youth that come out who say they want to do something, do something of their own, they're innovative, but innovation and creativity are two different things, basically, as you grow along. So how do we tap into those two, get that mindset, so that the incubator comes up does its work to support these entrepreneurs and startups so that they see value in that incubator. Because if anybody sees value in that, then it can grow. And I think the last, what I would say that in a global perspective, there has to be value that the incubator is giving out, basically.
Right. Well, Tayo, I was having conversations over the last day about training and education for entrepreneurs. And obviously there's skills training that goes into it. Some of it's technical, some of it's how to do business, how to get funding. But I was also thinking about exactly what you were talking about mindset. Is there something you do or something maybe the network does and the mentoring does to help entrepreneurs have this sort of passion and openness and creativity that lets them really tackle a business and not be fearful?
So I think the type of people who come into incubators varies. So there are some that you might label as born entrepreneurs. So they come ready, they have an idea,
sure,
they're ready
yes.
to go. They just need the appropriate amount of support to build a business. There's another segment, maybe you want to classify them as university students, as an archetype,
Yes.
who aren't really educated to think about entrepreneurship as a real option. It's sort of there's a bit of a cultural barrier in terms of looking at entrepreneurship as a viable, legitimate option. So in the first case, it's more about, I guess, giving the entrepreneur as much of an advantage as you possibly can. I mean, there's a lot of variation, a lot of serendipity that comes into it, but you want the entrepreneur to be at the level to be able to run if he or she is already oriented in that direction. For someone who hasn't really considered entrepreneurship, it is more about mindset, that it is legitimate. There are things that you can do, look around, there are problems that you can solve, and to sort of look at, to your point, challenges as opportunities. So it kind of depends on who's coming in and where they're coming in from. But I did actually want to, make a comment about the ideal world of incubators.
Yes, please.
I think that if you want to call it this, I think there's actually a fair amount of fragmentation in the incubator
I think so,
market. And I think there's a lack of transparency of information in terms of the core value proposition of any given incubator on its own or
That's
as
a bit
compared
of what
to
I was
others.
trying to get at.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that, and you can actually see it here in Nairobi. When one incubator or hub starts and others join, you might see a little bit of the copycat syndrome because there's a way in which they have a catch-all sort of approach. So they do training, they do incubation, they do acceleration, they have fireside chats. It's like this whole menu of options. But as they encounter competitive forces, you start to see differentiation according to competitive advantage. So you'll see some that are focused on community building nexus types of things. So if I want to call out the iHub, I mean, everyone who's interested in entrepreneurship, tech, and innovation, whether they're strictly building startups or not, will end up at the iHub. But then you'll see others that focus strictly on a small cohort of entrepreneurs who are going to go through this rigorous journey. So NILAB is an example of that, is an accelerator. You don't go there to have coffee. I mean, you can, but
I'm sure they have
that'd be a little
coffee,
awkward. But the point is, as you start to see more incubators emerge, they will identify what their core value proposition is first, and then organize it vis-a-vis what others are doing. So you start to see a pipeline of service. So part of the problem is an entrepreneur starts at point A, but can't find his or her way to point Z.
Yes.
So if you start with an idea, you get some seed money, then where do you go? Now you're in growth stage, where do you go? So as the market matures, you start to see incubators take positions along that pipeline, which is better for the startups and for the entire ecosystem.
I would like to actually get to the specific topic of business model. So I'm sure you're all hoping for that. And we were talking about opportunity before, David, and I'll tell you really quickly that I met a Turkish entrepreneur who became a billionaire because he walked out of a bar drunk and got behind the wheel of his car, got stopped and had his license taken away. Now he has the largest transportation company in Turkey, And he told his whole story, which I won't go into, but that was a very personal problem and opportunity that was presented to him in a very palpable way. And obviously, you're looking at a very specific opportunity that is specific to places here and also in other countries that have similar problems. Do you have any ideas about how you can help entrepreneurs recognize opportunity and think about it in that way?
Let me touch on that in terms of the incubation, because I think that's the first thing I started with.
Yes.
That, if you go to the US and look at the silicon, that's the pot, the brewing pot of ideas.
Yes, that's right.
That makes it, it gives you the platform to market your initial idea. It's generated, it's incubated. Now, when you come to this part of the world, there are still several challenges in incubation. One is the curriculum. If I sit down as an entrepreneur, there are the specific things that I need incubated into. Not a general curriculum. And you'll find most of them, really, the incubation is like, it's a 1 week or whichever period, and we want to teach you ABCD. That's not what I need. And the moment we start breaking these barriers, then we start seeing the opportunity where entrepreneurs themselves can actually even pay the incubation to get the value. Because it's about positioning. I would want to leverage, the competitive advantage that this incubator or the incubation team is placing my organization and that positioning. So when you come to here, those are some of the few challenges that blocks you from, and it takes time to move from that, to climb up the ladder. I have attended several initiatives. Last month I was in the spring by the USAID and TFID. And for 2 weeks, we sat down. The whole idea was, David, what do you need to grow your business? And I came up with a curriculum. This is what I need. How do we get, if it's a legal issue, how do we get one of the legal person who can understand this the specific area?
Yes.
For you to sit down and really thrash out that, because maybe that's my bottleneck. If I jump there, then I can come for financing. And we need to leverage that. And that's why I say that in this part of the continent, we are lacking those systems. Yes, we have. Go to Nairobi now, there are several incubation hubs. Yet we don't have that coordinated where we can say, if I have an idea, how do I test it? 47 years ago, when Kenya, after independence, the government knew that the future of Kenya is entrepreneurship. And they set up across the whole country the Kenya Industrial Estate. Wow. The main purpose for Kenya Industrial Estate was to provide a technical environment where I can go with my idea, spend for 6 months or 1 year. When I'm ready to go to the market and set up my own business, then I have learned, I have been incubated. In a very technical, if I need engineering input, the equipments are there. And maybe that's the little small things here I need as a carpenter or a mason. When I go out there, I just go and roll out my plan. Now, 47 years down the line, nothing worked. And it was hijacked by the top big businesses. They own the Kenya Industrial Estate, and that's where they do their business. Whereas it was supposed to be 6 months to 12 months, incubate yourself, get out, so that we create opportunity for other people to come in.
That's right.
The finance institution would now be going to the Kenya Industrial Estate and saying, oh, what are you doing? What is it that you need in terms of capital? Can we jumpstart you? Can we all add something on top of it? So those are some of the challenges we're looking at in terms of really developing these models. Because until my model picks up, that's the only time the investors or the financing team want to hear the story.
That's right.
When I'm struggling down there, I have to sell my little asset here and there, borrow from relatives and goodwills to be able to mold that.
I'm a believer that there are business models that are interesting and disruptive but can work in lots of different places. But I also do believe that there are business models that can be very specific to a specific place. There are 2 entrepreneurs here this weekend who won IBM business plan competitions. One is Ashifi Gogo from Sproxel, and the other is Julian Kayula from Mode, and they both have international businesses now, but they started specifically in Africa to solve very specific problems that were here in a very creative way. They're both speaking tomorrow, so you should go see them. But Harry, I was wondering if the companies that come through Demo, what category do they sort of fall in? Do you see very creative things that are really helpful here on the continent and specific to Africa? Are there business models for Africa that you're seeing coming through your events or not?
I think a lot of the companies that we see, a lot of them actually have a focus on either within the country or within the region. So a lot of their business models, so to speak, are geared towards reaching the customer within what they can reach. So those ones are sort of, I can say they're determined by the consumer patterns within that country or within that region. And I think that consumer patterns, consumption patterns, I think are a big driver of the business model. Because you look at how people are consuming whatever you're developing, then your business is aligned to that and therefore able to deliver that value. So we're seeing different companies having different business models, but in general, I think the word is innovation. I think what happens is a business can work in any environment as long as it's innovated to fit within that specific sphere. So I can take a business that has been developed for the Nigerian market, but if you look at the Nigerian market, has almost similar problems as a Kenya in terms of traffic. So with a few tweakings within the business model, that solution can actually work in Kenya. So it's about innovation. How do you innovate a business or a business model to fit in a certain space? I always say, when you look at business models, and this is something that I really like, is Africans are very, they've always been, they have a culture of sharing. We shared so many things, including Microsoft, before we knew that it was piracy. Yeah?
It seemed like sharing, though.
Yeah.
It felt like
So yeah, we shared, because you buy Microsoft and share it with the next guy and share. But
there
then
any lawyers here?
Later we were told that's piracy, so don't do it. But if you look at actually cloud computing, that's sharing. Yeah, it's sharing resources.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's about adapting to situations. It's about looking at who you are targeting, who you are serving, and therefore, you've realized there's a gap here, but how does this person want to consume this service? Then being able to align that consumption pattern with your business. I think that's what I see around me.
I think business models apply both to the innovation in the product and the solution and what you're building and the disruptions you can have in the market, but I think they also apply to how you go to market. I met the CEO of a mobile payments company that was based in the US. They're disrupting payments. So that was their business model. But they decided to go sell across India. And there was a nice blonde lady who put on a sari and went from village to village and sat on the floor of the little homes in the villages and told the ladies about how this worked. And that got them a tremendous amount of respect and business. And that was a go-to-market innovation. And so, I'd like to hear some comment about the types of business model disruptions or innovations you're seeing. And I'll take that from anyone who wants to talk about that.
Well, let me just comment on that. I think the danger I see when I talk to entrepreneurs, and I'm fortunate in that I have interactions with entrepreneurs all around the world, is that many of them are actually creating sort of an intellectual obstacle for themselves. They're trying to find massive problems to solve. They're trying to take these huge leaps of imagination when, in fact, you could jump off a cliff by just stepping 1 inch. You don't need to jump and run real far. And so the reason I bring that analogy up is that, often industries can be shifted by gradualism. You don't need to try and solve poverty in Africa. We launched a peer-to-peer lending crowdfunding platform when I was based in Denmark. And the idea was basically connect investors in Europe to micro enterprises in Africa, no collateral, and the whole thing didn't really work the way you would imagine because they tried to be too big. Literally, the vision for this organization was to eradicate poverty in Africa. We tied it very nicely to the Millennium Development Goals. Those came and went, and so did the business model. Because the reality, the vision was too big. It was very noble. We spent millions and millions and millions of dollars trying to do it. But had we just said, we want to build a clean way to get capital from A to B, and let the market then decide how that thing grows, it'd still be around, and I think it'd thrive. Uber doesn't become Uber by trying to solve global mobility issues with the phone. That the market decided. Uber said, we've got a very clean, on-demand platform that could hail a cab.
In San Francisco.
Right. And then all of a sudden the market blossomed. And so many, many, many entrepreneurs around the world, and certainly, again, I see it from my Pan-African entrepreneur friends, they're trying to solve these massive problems. So a good friend of mine, he just became one of the TEEP fellows with the Tony Elumelu Entrepreneurship Program. He has this incredible platform in a lab that will do off-grid solar energy, and they've solved the problem of how to store it for overnight hours and broadcast. The issue was, well, if you're trying to solve the lack of electricity, you also need to worry about energy distribution, which isn't a problem you're prepared to solve. So in sitting down and talking to him, I said, forget that market. Let's just move and disrupt the generators of the world. That for every telephone pole and for every broadcast station, there's a diesel-powered, dirty generator attached to it. Yeah. Let's just put a little solar generator there and be content that you've done that. Because that is a better proposition than I'm trying to solve energy in Africa. And I said, well, how much time do you have? Right?
And that's a big business.
It's a huge business. Yeah. But that's my point, is it doesn't have to be massively disruptive. I think disruptive is a very dangerous word in entrepreneurship, and we should kill it. We should think about doing
Wait, things, I had it as a topic.
doing things for real. Launch real businesses. Don't just worry about getting funding in a lab. Just go out and do real things. Because then investors will like you because you have conviction.
How many people here are, yes, absolutely. How many people here are investors? Boy, they told me they invited a bunch of investors. Okay, there's a few. All and right. How many people here have their own business and are doing startups and are entrepreneurs? Yay, you. Oh, right, this is very exciting.
So identify the investors. They were hiding earlier, now you know who they are.
You were supposed to be looking around the room so you would know who to collar afterwards. So, you know, you don't want to talk about disruption, but these entrepreneurs do, and the investors want to know what the next biggest disruptions are going to be so they know where to put their money. So who wants to comment on that?
Just a quick one. I mean, when we talk about disruption, in terms of really strategic within business, a good example is M-Pesa.
Yeah.
You know, it's doing things that actually outside the ecosystem.
That's right, that were never done before.
You know,
right.
By the time they were doing it, it was purely a trial.
Yeah.
They never knew, and that's why
they never knew where that was
we have to go beyond the consumption patterns. Because in most cases, we actually don't know whether there's any consumption potential. You know, they never knew whether Kenyan would adopt that until they did and surpassed, I don't know how many millions of dollars. That's when the government sits back and like, how do we regulate this now? It's getting out of hands.
Right.
Doing more business than Kenya banks, you know, then it starts now becoming an issue and regulations can follow. Now, that's what I would call disruption. You know, it's purely jumping beyond the consumption pattern. And that's why I said in most cases, very few investors are ready to do that because it's again unproven case. You know, you are not even sure where you're headed to until you realize, okay, there is adoption. 100,000 people, you know, and that's the same thing we encountered. When I did the first eco-toilet in the city of Nairobi, the whole idea by the county government was we're only going to give you one chance, one opportunity, because we don't think your idea can even work. Yeah, until I did the first one.
So that's very motivating.
Yes. Right. So we launched the first one, and from day one there was a queue. And we told them, we don't need 6 months of monitoring and doing all stuff of counting. Day one,
Spreadsheets.
we have 2,000 users in one facility.
Yeah.
That means there's a demand.
Yeah, that's right.
And immediately after that, they signed 50 facilities for us. So to me, that's what I would call disruption.
That's right.
After that, 2 years down the line, that's when we started sorting out the legalities and realizing that we actually entered into a framework that does not exist, which was enacted 3 years ago in Kenya, the PPP.
Oh, yeah.
So when I was doing it, I never knew it was a PPP, public-private partnership.
Right.
I came in, I really wanted to sort out the issue of sanitation in the city. That was all. But the lawyers will say, you did it illegally. Now, do we have to wait until we get a regulatory framework to start the investment? Now, that's where disruption becomes of essence.
That's right, that's right. I'll bet there are people sitting here who would like to ask a question. And was there a microphone we can share or not?
They have to use
Oh, I think you have to use this one. And was there somebody to hand people microphones? Or, oh, you're very kind. Because otherwise, you're going to have to shout. So this is better.
Hi, I'm DJ, I'm Dutch. I've been living here in Kenya for the past 2.5 years, involved in a couple of different startups, some as investor, some as mentor, and some as just for fun. What really grinds my gears a little bit is that whenever we talk about leapfrogging or new business models, we end up with M-Pesa. We also have to understand and appreciate it. M-Pesa was a perfect storm. It was very lenient regulatory framework, no competition authority, a very dominant player, and banks sleeping or competing with each other rather than delighting the customer. So coming back with M-Pesa over and over again is not going to solve the problem because there's not going to be a next M-Pesa for that matter. Especially not with that same dominant player still being the dominant player. And if you have an ID that is maybe leapfrogging and disruptive, you'll end up at the mercy of Safaricom. And if they like your ID, they'll say, no, 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 it's not going to work, and they'll run with it. So what are we going to do with that? Because, say, with the investors, we have to create an ecosystem that can allow disruption vis-a-vis the existing businesses that are still controlling the business.
I'm not supposed to answer questions, but I'm going to take that one because I'm the moderator and I can.
That's right.
Okay, don't do that.
Opportunity and recognizing opportunity and taking advantage of it is partly luck. I got the job I have by luck, but I created an environment in which I could be lucky and recognize it. The two companies I mentioned, Sproxel and Mode, disrupted their industries and did something new by forming ecosystems that hadn't existed for them before. So Sproxel formed an ecosystem originally with pharmaceutical companies and the telcos here in Africa. And in fact, governments, because they were putting billboards on the sides of buses about how not to get stuck with fraudulent drugs. And then Mode formed relationships with banks and telcos in order to do what they do. Go, go, go.
Pitched his ID to Safaricom, and they said, no, it's not going to work, and now it's called Jokoazi.
Yeah, well, these guys work with Airtel and MTN. What can I say? Another question?
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Beatrice Mwasi, and I'd like to ask a question to follow on the question, the discussion around copycat. Because this morning and this afternoon, I think the key line that we are receiving and getting is that we need to be unique as entrepreneurs. We need to innovate. We need to be distinctive in the kind of ideas that we generate in order for us to succeed. Now, operating in an environment where the formal education does not provide education in terms of how you can process an idea, basically engage creativity into realizing an innovation. How do we enable entrepreneurs in this part of the world generate innovative ideas, therefore, that can suffice or that can be as successful as the ideas that you're you're presenting. Because I agree that we have a challenge in terms of innovation, and we understand, therefore, that we need to innovate. But the question here is, do we have existing models that we can hook onto so that we can learn, those of us who are here and those that are not here, on how we can therefore become more innovative?
Yes, for sure. That can be done, please.
Basically, I would look at it this way. There's entrepreneurship for existence, and then there's entrepreneurship for business. These two are different. Most of the people who are at what we call the bottom of the pyramid, it's usually entrepreneurship for existence, because I need to survive. So I'll do what somebody else does, but in another corner, in another area, per se. But entrepreneurship for business means that you're going to create something, and then whoever your customer has to see value in that. And for the customer who buys that business to see value, you have to be innovative, because you're going to have competition. So what stops me from buying your commodity rather than me buying somebody else's commodity? It's the value, the innovation that you bring to that system. And this is why incubators are there. This is why the ABN is there, basically. So those are the bottom of the pyramid, basically, require that assistance. And this is why I say there must be an ecosystem that looks to support them to grow, basically, and teach them how do you make your business. You can shift, you can pivot from entrepreneurship for existence to entrepreneurship for business. It's easy to do that in a business. Well, it's not easy, but it's difficult. But you need some training, you need support to get that done. And that's why incubators are there, that's why the AfriLabs is there, that's why Demo Africa is there, and that's why this great man will give you the financing you need to support you to move forward.
That's absolutely true. I met somebody who has the Net-a-Porter of Turkey. I can't remember what it's called. It was Net-a-Porter in France, but their innovation was not how it worked or what the e-commerce would be like or how you would sell or market to people. It was that they used Turkish fashion designers, and they became a very big company. So even with copycat businesses, the innovation can come in many different places. Go ahead.
Hi, hello, my name is Jabu Jablani Mpofu. I'm from Zimbabwe. I'm the co-founder of an idea lab called NeoLab and a startup called SciSci. So my question is on, we actually went through Demo Africa last year, which is a system that heavily emphasizes on innovation. We actually won an award on innovation for technology then.
Great.
But at that point in time, we didn't so much of a business. We had awesome technology that we had developed. And then over last year, from the time we left Demo Africa up at this point, the one challenge we faced mostly was trying to survive with when you're basing your business on new technology that you have developed, and then you're trying to survive within a marketplace or an industry that is very cutthroat, where you're trying to sell the same product, but it's much better to, or you have different processes of delivering that product to the consumer. And then basically it's a system where there are big companies that are gigantically funded. They are just able to try and maneuver around your technology and still deliver same value to consumers in a difficult way. So much that we have had to change our business model so many times between then and now just to try and survive in that industry. My question is on the issue of startups. What is the role of startups in terms of innovation? Are we meant to try and focus on innovation at a business model level or at a technical level? Because surviving as a business when what you have is technology, and there are these big, gigantic companies that you are competing against, has been very, very difficult for us. And I mean, the issue of technology, we've seen VHS over beta. It seems as though somebody who invents new technology, brings it to the marketplace, is underfunded, is a small company. You spend a lot of time trying to educate the consumer. This is awesome tech. This is, you can now, MySpace, you can now communicate with friends, use the internet for social. And then at the end of the day, there's some big Facebook that comes in and then collects all the work that you've done and makes a gigantic business out of it.
Right. Harry, can you comment on that?
Yeah, I can. I think, Jabu, I think if you're running a business, then you have to run a business. In the sense that the technology is, a lot of, in fact, even investors, when they're looking at, when they're assessing, yes, it's good to have a good technology running, but at the end of the day, you're supposed to deliver a service. And it's that service that you're delivering that will actually or rather forms the business, because that's where now you'll generate your revenues and therefore sustenance for your business. So I think those are, I don't know how to respond to this, but I'm just thinking if you're going to focus on your technology, then probably you need to be a technology provider of some sort, probably in a university or in a research lab. But if you want to sell the technology, to become a business, then you have to have the ability and the resilience to be able to take this product that you've developed and sell it to the market and compete with whoever you have to compete. Because that's how business is.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I mean, if I could add just a quick
Yes,
response
please.
to that. Don't let perfect get in the way of good. So entrepreneurs are struggling to make their business models perfect, super elegant, the best and the fastest. And frankly, when you ask the CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, what's your number one and your number three biggest challenge? It's execution. It's not the best articulated corporate strategy or vision or values, it's getting things done.
That's right.
And so you could have a mediocre product. I can think of a million industries where you get really rubbish service and rubbish products, but you still use them because they execute. They've got the human capital aligned, everything else works like a machine, and people buy it.
That is very true. Next. You're next after that one.
Okay. My name is Lily Kujiro. I run a social enterprise in Ghana,
Oh, cool.
which is a children's art organization. And I don't agree with, sorry, I don't know your name. Yes, you. Yes, sorry. You. Yes. When he said that the incubators are there to provide that training for entrepreneurs in creativity and innovation, I was thinking that if we should provide it in our formal education from the young stage, then entrepreneurs or young people, by the time they leave school and want to be entrepreneurs, they already have an idea about what they're going to do, what they want to create. They have that creativity and innovative skill already. And instead of you using that money now to support the incubators, now you can use that money to support them to kickstart whatever they want to do. So I think that it's very essential for us to bring creativity and innovation into our formal education in Africa, because we really need that for every child in wherever they find themselves, whether they want to be doctors or whatever. They need to be creative and different at it. Thank you.
That was very good. I was going to ask you to comment on that because, okay.
Since you pointed out
but I did
me,
want to talk about education, so.
if I do, you're right in a way, but if I do that in Tanzania, I'll wait for the next 17 years to get that done because it's a policy framework. The current education policy in Tanzania was redone, I think, this year, but it took 16 years to get it done.
Oh, gosh.
I can't wait that long to have children who come out, who are taught entrepreneurship the way it is. That's number one. Number two, the number of students who can understand entrepreneurship, basically, in terms of going through the scale up to university, dwindles, becomes like a pyramid to the top, basically. And there is this classical way of teaching, where we teach our students to cram because they want to get a grade, not to think out of the box. So now there are programs, because of what you're saying, there are programs that are being done by others to try and supplement what the education system is not supposed to be doing. So you're right in a sense, but then at the end of the day, we're in a situation whereby it's not being done there, so should I not do it? So I don't know.
Teo needs a mic.
I'll be very brief. So I agree with you too, and I agree with what George said. I mean, the fact of the matter is that these incubators are responding to a market failure. The education system should provide creativity, training in creativity, entrepreneurship, and innovation, but they're not, and they're not doing it quickly. So to George's point, you either step in and attempt to, patch the gaping hole, or you wait. So the approach is to do what it's possible to do with the resources that we have. But I think the next step, the next opportunity, is to see how incubators can partner strategically and intelligently with tertiary institutions to see how there can be, I guess I shouldn't call it reverse innovation, but the things that are being tried in incubators can arguably be transferred to educational institutions. So let's think about how to create partnerships between incubators and educational institutions so we're getting the wheel to spin a little bit faster.
In some countries, the educational institutions are the ones who have incubators, so it works the other way around. Okay.
Thank you all for your thoughts and your comments and your experiences. It's been a great panel. I had one comment about this idea of copycatting. And I went to a conference once and someone stood up and talked about you can copy a business, but you can't copy the soul of a business. So as we're talking about, you know, copycatting, replicating the same ideas, you should always go back to why you're creating the business that you're creating and also what is the soul of your business. And I think from there, you will breed creativity and innovation. But I also have a question, and it's an incubator question. We're talking about building better business models and training a new generation of entrepreneurs that are equipped with the tools to address issues on the continent. And so with the incubators, how much of the training is teaching entrepreneurs about impact and being able, not just about making profit, which every business needs to, but about creating better business models that are transformative and addressing some of the issues that we see on the continent? Thank you.
So I'll just offer my quick perspective on that. It depends on the incubators. Some are very much focused on whole impact. So yes, let's make a profit, but let's tackle the larger social problems that we want to see addressed and use business as a way to do that. Other incubators are more strictly focused on high profit, high growth. And there's also a perspective, and you may agree or disagree, on what impact actually is or what counts as social impact. There are a lot of entrepreneurs that say, if I'm building a business and I'm creating jobs and the people I hire are able to feed their families and then there are knock-on effects, a bunch of people, a large number of people they're supporting, that's impact, that's end true. Of discussion. There's another school of thought that's arguably more triple bottom line that thinks more about, you know, what are the environmental, social, and economic implications, but it kind of depends on how you define impact. Some incubators take the triple bottom line-ish approach. Some are more economic development is impact. But I think there's a growing acknowledgement of the fact that entrepreneurship is actually a force for, if you want to call it, social good. And the businesses that are being created should have demonstrable impact, social and otherwise, in the communities that they're formed in.
If I just may add a quick remark to that. I mean, this notion of copycats, which my controversial colleague to my right brought up, remember, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. So if you see that Uber is doing incredibly well in San Francisco, and you're in Lagos, import Uber before Uber imports Uber, and there's no shame in that. As you said yourself, because what will be distinctive is the entrepreneur or the sponsor and the soul that they bring to the equation. Because ultimately competition, as the gentleman was talking about earlier, is when you have a viable business. When people have identified, when you've found something that others are willing to compete for, then you know you can put your pen down and bring your knife to the market and start fending off competitors and figuring out how to do things better. And so I wouldn't be embarrassed at all about saying I copycatted all kinds of things, because ultimately those are viable business models that need to be imported into markets where they don't exist.
As long as you care deeply about them.
And possibly Uber might want to buy you.
Exactly.
In the back. Oh, okay, you, and then you, and then you. Okay.
Thanks. My name is Benedict, and I'm a banker and entrepreneur. I share DJ's somewhat allergy on the over-reference of M-Pesa, but I'll use it nonetheless here to ask you a question. Now, replicating M-Pesa in many other countries, maybe more and more, with the exception of Tanzania, has been, if you consider how much money has been thrown at it, pretty much a failure. How do you deal with the challenge of businesses in Africa finding out how to make models that worked in one place work as they try to go Pan-African? Which tools, which approaches do you recommend?
That's a good question.
Come on, guys. Okay.
Me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm happy to take a crack at it. I think, you know, market expansion is not a lighthearted activity. Established global firms with billions of dollars and legions of very smart people and MBAs and all the like fail at market expansion consistently. And so for entrepreneurs to say, I like M-Pesa, I'm a Kenyan entrepreneur, but I want to go do it somewhere else because M-Pesa's crowded the market, I think that's a massively complicated proposition. So you're adding, on top of having to make the business model work, you're adding the whole element of exporting, basically, which is an activity, you know, countries don't even do well. Nobody does that stuff well. And so I think the tools at your disposal are, in the day and age of you know, internet and the hot, flat, crowded world that everybody talks about, theoretically it's very easy to export things, but the thing that you could export the most easily is an idea, right? Not necessarily a business model, and certainly not something that gets stuck in customs. You're going to run into a lot of challenges. And so I think, you know, there is no easy answer, but it's just, market expansion is a massively complicated task that is a different skill set than traditional entrepreneurship would call for.
In Tanzania, it has worked, I would say, for two major reasons. One, the regulatory environment, and two, the competition. Now, here in Kenya, M-Pesa started with Safaricom. It was a dominant, and then they got in some money. Initially, it came from DFID, the initial funding for M-Pesa, and then taken over by Safaricom and moved up, and it worked quite well. In Tanzania, the regulatory authority broke down the way telecoms operate, basically. That's number one. And number two, the competition now for the other telecom, we've got four and a half or five telecom operators, at least 4 telecom operators in Tanzania. And they want to catch up to Vodacom, which also has M-Pesa, basically. And so what do you do to do that? So you also copycat in a way, basically, and with a different slight change to what is being done, so that you can have more transaction flows in your system, so that you can entice people to come to your network. So those two things are the ones that made the financial transactions through mobile payments work quite well in Tanzania, basically. And to answer, to comment on your statement of copycat, and so you're right, because the issue of copycat is the one that has made us, particularly where I come from, has made entrepreneurs not trust each other, because you're going to steal my idea. But then the point that we normally tell them is that if I sit here on the chair and say, I'm going to build a car, and then he hears me, and then he goes and builds a car, you can't go patent that by the statement that I'm going to build an idea. It's how you do it. It's the soul that you're talking about that does it, that makes it possible. So if you share the generalities, it's okay. You may learn something from that, basically. And we try to get entrepreneurs to do that, you know. So copy the idea, fine, not a problem. But how do you go implement it? How do you do it? And how do you present it? Because each character, each individual is totally different. And one may do the same thing and fail, the other one may not, you know, basically.
Maybe just to add something to that, there's also an element of culture in this whole thing. Because you see, if you look at Kenya, so I live in the city. I have a rural home in Rabai. How many of you know where Rabai is? Okay, thank you. I have a rural home in Rabai. In Rabai, I do farming. So I have guys who help me in the farm, and I also have somebody who looks after my house when I'm not there. So I need to be able to pay those guys every week, right? So there's a necessity for me to use M-Pesa. So I have to, you know, and M-Pesa just came in, and it just made it so easy, because initially what we had to do, they had to wait for me to travel to Rabai to be able to pay them, right? Now, these are the markets. I don't know whether that's the same dynamic. Because you see, now, most Kenyans are like that. They have their city home and their rural home. And they have to be sending money to their parents, or they have to be sending money to their people out there. So M-Pesa has worked because of that kind of network. That network effect is what has given M-Pesa the scale. Yeah, so I don't know how these other places are, but I think that has a lot to do with the usage and the scaling of M-Pesa in Kenya.
There was a question. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
It's not an answer, it's an open musing, actually, about this expansion question. But I wonder if the success has something to do with the strategy. Like, presumably there's a difference between kind of spreading M-Pesa as an entity. So that's about operations and branding and securing market share. But presumably you could also expand by acquisition. So maybe there are baby M-Pesas in different countries that are sort of getting off the ground. So M-Pesa is going to scale by saying, I'm going to take you, and you're now all going to become M-Pesa. And then maybe there's like a JV of copycats. So there are a bunch of startups that are much smaller than M-Pesa. Maybe we're not even talking about M-Pesa anymore, but it's essentially the same business in 5 different locations. So maybe those businesses are starting to talk to each other and say, hey, if we work together, now we're having an M-Pesa type of opportunity. So it's really just an open question. Does it depend on the type of expansion strategy that you employ?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I mean, I knew a small telco in Eastern Europe that built their business by buying other ones in each country. And so that is absolutely a business strategy, but it's a strategy. There was a question way in the back, and then we'll come back here. Or, yeah, that's right.
Hi, everybody. My name is Innocent Silingi. I'm the project lead for Africa for John Deere. I have a question for Theo. What I like and what I'm realizing from what's being spoken here, innovation is the currency of entrepreneurship. Let's start from there. Now, the challenge is, because innovation is the currency of entrepreneurship, what makes it legal tender in other markets and not in particular markets? So the question I have for Theo is, she had talked about creating a complementary framework that actually supports innovation or entrepreneurs as a value-added service. So I'm trying to think outside of just human development, training, incubation, what else can we look out for? I mean, because I also feel we are a market for you who've done very well, but how do we implement what you guys are doing? Is it by having something like Entrepreneurs Without Borders, where we can link into as a platform and get what you're talking about? So for me, it's the legal tender. How does it become more acceptable in my market? And how do I link into that? So other than just human development, is there any other opportunity for me to scale up my model from market development, market acceleration, from a fundable model to one that is bankable? I think that's what I'm just asking.
Okay, I think I heard several questions, so I think I might need you to reiterate what the core question is, if you don't mind.
Apologies. So basically what I'm asking, you had talked about creating a complementary framework. I picked it up from what you had said, as a value add to support innovation. Now, complementary in the sense maybe you want to develop me through an incubation. That's what I was thinking. So other than just developing me, the innovator, or me, the entrepreneur, me as an entity, is there any other opportunities that we can drive, that adjacent growth? Because it's about how we really manage adjacent growth. Yeah.
Okay, so the way that I was attempting to present it, or the way that I'm thinking about it, is really just one of the core challenges for entrepreneurs, apart from financing, is market access. So how do entrepreneurs learn about the markets that they want to expand into? How do they learn about their customers? How do they learn about the cultural elements that they need to understand? And so the idea is, if we believe that startups, and this is a hypothesis, that startups should be regional as well as Pan-African, how do we connect hubs of startups or networks of startups and networks of hubs to enable any given entrepreneur to land in a new market and get the type of support services that he or she would require to get quick or at least expedient answers to those questions? So if you are based in, again, Cape Town, and you're going to Douala and you're trying to understand how to expand your business, when you land at the airport, who's there to meet you? Who's telling you where you need to stay? Who's telling you who the local players are? Who's helping you set up meetings with those individuals? Who's giving you market information? who's introducing you to potential JV partners. So it's about providing the resources on the ground when you've decided that you're interested in expanding to get you to the next level more efficiently, essentially.
Hello, my name is Tanya Tomé. I am the Executive Business Director of EcoKai, an investment firm and advisory. I just want to add something about M-Pesa, because M-Pesa is in Mozambique. I am from Mozambique, and I live in Mozambique. Many companies, many entrepreneurs decide to work only the supply side, and they have to absolutely work as well, complementary with the demand side. M-Pesa, the problem is not only the culture, it's education. Many people doesn't know how to use it. And in fact, it's a fact that Kenyan people is advanced in terms of education. In Mozambique, we don't have that. Because of that, incubators, training, and so on, there are plenty of opportunities to that, because we don't have. So we have to work with that, demand side, business development service, even when we try to offer alternative ways of finances, equity, quasi-equity, and so on. People doesn't know, people are afraid from this type of investment. The other thing is the local partner. You talk a little bit about that, and I think the local partner are, the main thing on that strategical to export. Local partner know what is the need of the market, culture thing, and know exactly what to do with this potential investor that want to come and set up in Mozambique.
And they might very well have a supply chain that you can go on top of.
Exactly.
Right,
thank you.
I think we're out of time, so I want our panelists, I want to say, I will be here all day tomorrow. How many people will be here tomorrow? Raise your hand. Yes. So we will be here tomorrow, so we can talk some more. I would like each of you to just say a wrap-up comment. Like, these are entrepreneurs mostly in the audience. What would you tell them they need to think the most about?
Two things. One, you found a couple of the investors in the room.
Right.
And two, I would just say, build businesses you want to run, not businesses you want to fund. When you satisfy the investor community, you're checking way too many boxes, and it becomes way too formulaic. You lack passion, and you're just telling somebody else's story. And focus on something you want to run and that you want to be the CEO of, and hire staff and build finance around and all the rest. And then I think you have all the fighting chance in the world to make it.
Yay. George needs a mic. Your mic. Then you'll pass it back.
All I can say is, I'll end with a story, if it's all right, basically,
yes,
just to make, which leads to jump on the opportunity, think out of the box, right, basically. So this guy has got a Rolls Royce, he's driving to Manhattan, and he has a meeting, and then he's going to the airport. Parking in Manhattan for 1 hour is at least $40. He's going to go away for 4 days. Per day, the whole thing will have been close to roughly, for the time that it's going to go away, it will have costed him at least $600–700. So he's driving into town and he thinks, what do I do? Then he says, oh yeah, I know what I'll do. He goes into a bank and says, I need a loan. How much? He says, $1,000. So you need collateral. He says, here are the keys to my Rolls Royce. It's collateral. So the guy says, okay, fine.
This is a great story.
We
see where this is going.
Right. So he gets the loan for $1,000, puts it, leaves the car, goes to his meeting, goes away, comes back after 5–6 days and says, okay, how much do you owe me? $1,068. He pays it to the guy. The guy takes his key. And the bank asks him, but I Googled you. You have money. Why did you want to bring your car, get a loan for $1,000? He says, whereas in Manhattan, that's New York City, can I park for 6 days for $68? so now, the thing is, grab the opportunity, think out of the box, and be creative, basically. And
that's creative.
Good. I think in terms of investment and for entrepreneurs, we are still talking about culture and space where you are. So two things that I would want to bring out is the passion. It's what you're doing and how you're doing it. It's that passion of what you want to do. But passion alone will not sell to the investors. It's about understanding the value chain, and that's where the story lies. You need to get your story right. Thank you.
So I would say, speaking of stories, don't get caught up in jargon and hype. We talked a lot about copycatting versus being innovative and unique and, et cetera, et cetera. Find a problem that you want to solve and address it. If you can solve it by copycatting until next tomorrow, do that. If you're having an impact and you're making money, do that. If there's a problem that you really want to solve and you think it takes next level thinking and going beyond the status quo, do that. But don't waste time thinking about, well, I have to be this way, I have to do it this way. Your approach will be determined by what problem you're trying to solve and what you think is the best way to actually solve that problem.
He has a mic.
For me, I think I have different messages for different people. So I'll start with the entrepreneurs. I think keep on doing what you're doing. Just keep on asking a lot of questions about what you're doing. Either sometimes we forget and we don't ask ourselves questions. So try and ask yourself questions, whether what you're doing is actually what you should be doing. I think that's important. I want to invite you to demo. We don't take a lot of startups. We can only launch 30 in a year. But if you're innovative, if you're scalable, if you have potential to get JD to put money in you, then we will launch you. So look out for the next round of applications, which will be around March next year. For the investors, I think this is a time to plug in. I think don't be too risk averse in terms of looking at technology startups in Africa. I think there's been a lot of maturity in the past few years. And we are seeing, companies growing and scaling. Mode, Cellulant, Virtual City, those are companies that are completely homegrown, and because of investment that has gone into them, they've been able to grow into huge companies, and they're now competing with the best of the best in their sector. So plug in, don't be left out. And the last, it's a commercial.
Go ahead.
Please come to Demo Africa. It's on the 24th and 25th of September in Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you very much.
Bravo. I want to thank our very helpful panel and our very engaged audience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.